Hey guys! Today I wanted to do a brief showcase of the Soulbender for the Male Slayer class. I'll be covering things like general playstyle, tips and tricks for some notable skills, talisman recommendations, some example rotations, and some gearing guidelines for endgame optimization. To start, Soulbender is a very efficient and fast-paced synergy class and deals magic percentage damage, meaning he scales with intelligence and magic attack. So you'll actually want to reinforce your weapon. Refining will do nothing. So let's just jump straight into his skills. To begin with, I want to go over Kazan, which is a base Male Slayer skill, and as you can see, it just summons this red ghost, which normally supplies you and your party a stat boost within its range. However, as a Soulbender, instead you'll get a skill attack boost per level. And this does scale up when it goes past the master level. And then Bremen is another ghost, which you put down normally as a Soulbender, this green circle here. It provides your party with synergy, 34% damage intensification. However, later on when you get your second awakening and get a level of Phantom Mastery, what will happen is Bremen will no longer be able to be summoned. As you can see, it is grayed out. I cannot summon him. Instead, let me put this back. Instead, it'll become a passive ability, and the synergy effect will just be a debuff. So whenever you hit something, as long as you just hit an enemy, you'll see these purple boxes. This is your synergy effect. You just hit an enemy. So nothing, and then I hit him. Oops. There it is. That's pretty cool. And way easier than just, putting down a circle. Next, I want to talk about weapon masteries. So as Soulbender is a percentage class, you will want one of two weapon masteries. Short sword or katana. And so this just depends on what kind of playstyle you prefer. Do you want slightly higher attack speed with katana mastery and a little bit less magic attack? Or do you want slightly lower attack speed with slightly more magic attack? This does get a little more complicated when you look at the 100 epic weapons, specifically the Caliburn, which gives more speed, and Taiji's Emperor's Sword, which actually has a speed penalty on Yang Energy. So this can change the landscape just a little bit. But I do recommend you pick up one of these masteries and level it up. Next, I want to talk about your buff, Afterimage of Keiga. So this is just the normal buff like any other class. It gives you damage increases. However, it also changes your basic attack string. So from this string, this basic Male Slayer 3 combo, it'll get replaced with this 4-hit combo, which is pretty nice. But also, if you'll notice, whenever you dash, whenever you initiate a dash, for 1 entire second, you become completely invulnerable. And you can actually really make use of this by just reinitiating a dash to constantly enter and exit and re-enter iframes. And you can dodge a lot of things with this. This is very, very nice. On top of that, Keiga also gives you damage reduction. And as a cloth class, this is very, very, very nice. Next, I actually want to talk about this level 45 skill, Kalla of Dark Flame. So with Keiga up, if you summon Kalla, now your basic attack string becomes a 3-hit combo. But you'll also notice I'm shooting these fireballs out. And these fireballs actually do tick damage over time, each one. And the fireballs themselves also deal damage. So ideally, you'll be playing him in melee range, so you can also land the basic string as well as the Kalla fireballs. And this will be a large portion of his sustained damage. However, and this will never happen, but just in case, if you cast Kalla but not Keiga, your basic attack string becomes this. Now this you'll see in PvP, but in PvE, you will never see this. And you'll also notice you can actually use aerial attacks as well. And again, this is great for PvP, but in PvE, in dungeons, you will always have Keiga up. You can still use the aerial version, but this is what you'll see. Also, something about Kalla is, you'll see that it has the blue ghost behind me, and if I hit an enemy, it does tick damage. However, if you re-input Kalla, Kalla will become purple, and now these fireballs will no longer deal tick damage. And this is important for things like if you have the time counters, or if an enemy has like a reflect mechanic, etc. Make sure to turn this off while something important is going on. But if damage is more important, put it back on. There's no cooldown. You just toggle it whenever you please. Moving on to his actual skills now, something you can very easily overlook is Ghost Slash. Ghost Slash is just a very basic Male Slayer skill, as you can see. Nothing special. However, as a Soulbender, you gain access to something called Ghost Slash Drive, and now you can charge this ability and perform a dash attack. You can also hold backwards to not do that dash, and it'll just shoot at the ghost in front of you instead. This is actually a very, very good DPS tool. But after you get your Third Awakening at level 100, it gets another change, and now Ghost Slash becomes just this single slash, very fast animation. You just shoot out this little phantom twister thing, and you are also super armored for the entire duration. I highly recommend you get this, as well as the TP. Another option is actually Moonlight Slash, and normally it's not a great skill, and full Moonlight Slash makes it a 3-hit combo. It's kind of whatever. However, with Third Awakening, it does turn it into this now, which is kind of cool. The DPS is roughly the same as Ghost Slash. It does have a much lower cooldown, but this can actually be more detrimental than helpful. Next, I want to talk about Saya. So Saya is this blue ghost here that does tick damage, right? And also freezes enemies. But let's say you don't want to freeze them, right? What if you don't want to interrupt an enemy's movement? What you can do is, if you look at it, there's a lock function, and what you do is you hold control, and then you hit right click, and you'll toggle off the skill. And now, Saya will just deal damage and not freeze. Generally speaking, in endgame, this is not very important, but this can be useful for things like room clearing, if you have especially any party members that deal fire damage. If you freeze something and unfreeze something with fire damage, it can kind of just cause their AI to go berserk and just constantly reset. That can get kind of annoying, possibly dangerous. Generally speaking, it's not going to be a problem. I just leave it toggled on all the time. Next, I actually want to talk about the rest of his ghosts and just his playstyle, really. So the thing about Soulbender is that, as you can see, you can just summon his ghosts like this, by just summoning them, just casting them like that, like this. But a unique thing about Soulbender is that he can do something called free casting. What that means is, I can cast these ghosts in the middle of other animations. So for example, if I use Overdrive, you'll see my Saya, my Rhasa, and my Blade Phantom, and also actually my Tombstone Swamp are still lit up. So what I can do is, I can actually just use all of these during another skill's animation. And this is very, very nice. And this is key to playing Soulbender effectively. Because ideally, what you'll be doing is, you'll be using your basic strings, as skills come off cooldown, you'll be laying ghosts down while casting skills, and then continuing your basic attack string for maximum DPS. And this works with basically any skill he has that isn't already a free cast skill. So even your awakening, your first awakening, your second awakening, anything. Like that. It does not work with your Throat Awakening, however. And even, you know, this. Or even your 95 skill. Especially since it has a long animation. I actually just raw casted the Tombstone Swap, you didn't see that. And one more thing. Let's say there's an enemy that you don't want to hit. Let's say you actually have to keep them alive, like Gatekeeper and Sirocco. Or maybe Leonid and Osmerade. And you have ghosts down. And these ghosts can do a significant amount of damage. So he has something called Extinction Ritual. Which will be right here. You do have to learn the ability, it is not auto-learned. And you can set it to something simple. I have mine set to down up skill 2. And this will actually de-summon any ghosts that are out. Like that. So they'll just go away. However, you'll see that this enemy is still taking damage from Rhasa's ghost, right? So do be careful of that. This will not get rid of Blade Phantom, however. It won't do anything. You just have to press a skill again to initiate the finisher or whatever. Or maybe try to move an enemy outside of its range before the finisher goes off. Tombstone Swamp, similar thing. It's not a ghost. You can't de-summon it. You just have to explode it. Generally speaking, Tombstone Swamp isn't leveled very high or at all. So that's fine. And that's about it. There's nothing really super special. He does have things like Phantasma Slayer for iframes. It has super holds with it too. You also have Abyss for super holds. Zeeg super holds. A fair bit of utility. That's about it for his playstyle and skills. Let's move on to Talismans. So you'll see that right now I have Ghost Slash Overdrive, Dark Flame Sword, and Blade Phantom. So these talismans are actually kind of interesting. Specifically Ghost Slash Overdrive, now instead of just the smash, you get this suction tornado thing that'll actually, quite literally, pull the enemies into the center of the skill. And its range is actually quite large. And you'll see the multi-hit. It's very, very nice. This is very, very good for room clearing. It's very, very good just for locking down enemies like this. And now you can just do that. Very, very, very cool. It does add channeling to the ability, but the damage increase is very much worth it. This is one of your highest DPS skills in your kit. Next, Dark Flame Sword. This is actually kind of interesting. This doesn't really improve the damage of the skill very much. Dark Flame Sword's damage is not very high. However, what it does do is, it turns Dark Flame Sword into just a single slash, just the finisher. And it puts all the damage on that finisher. Now again, although the damage is low, this is very, very nice because now the range is actually quite large. A lot larger than you might think. Right? And if I press forward, I'll also dash through, and you'll see that it hit just everything in front of me. Even enemies like all the way over here. Didn't quite make it there. There we go. And he was basically off my screen. And this can be very, very useful for room clearing, and just in general, just for safe DPSing. Like that. Very, very high range. Blade Phantom is interesting because instead of summoning Blade Phantom like a ghost in a specific zone, now Blade Phantom will be summoned centered on you. And if you move, the Blade Phantom also moves. Which is kind of cool. And so, let's say you have a bunch of enemies spread out. Right? Let's say you want to hit all of them. I can do that. And then the finisher happens. And also, if you read the Talisman, the skill becomes a lot faster. The area duration is 2 seconds shorter, and the multi-hit interval is reduced by 3/4. So the skill does its damage way more quickly, as you can see. The multi-hits happen very fast. And the finisher is still there. And you can also still skip straight to the finisher, just like normal. Some alternatives that I won't actually show you are Blade Phantom Possession. This is kind of okay. The damage per cast is relatively high. The cooldown is about the same as Dark Flame Sword actually. It's relatively long, but it does have some utility in that it doesn't leave you in the air anymore. It doesn't put you in this awkward position where you're like, what do I do now? Do I just get some Kallas in, or do I Ash Fork, or maybe I, jump off axis here? What do I do? Instead, you'll just stay on the ground and just perform this while standing. That can be kind of cool, I guess. That can be safe as well. But generally speaking, it's not very popular. Things like, let's say, Abyss is actually considerably popular nowadays. The damage is actually quite good. It does lose the super hold capability that it normally has, but it does get cooldown reduction and increased damage. So this is actually quite viable. If you're into that, go for it. Rhasa is kind of weird on the other hand. It no longer is a circle with these like ghost things, these mummies that like launch at enemies. Instead, it's a single AoE that happens that just targets everything in range and does its damage. But I feel like that's not really an improvement to the skill. I feel like, honestly, it's worse. And the damage is okay. The damage is pretty alright. But in my opinion, I don't recommend it. And lastly, Tombstone Swamp. Please don't ever get this. The damage is so incredibly low. The cooldown is so incredibly high. It is just never worth it. It's kind of cool, but again, not worth the talisman slot. If this is the only thing you have, you can use it for a little bit, but you will replace it. That's about it. I will go into rotations really quickly. I'll be doing a rotation without talismans first, just to give you an idea what the class looks like. I am using a Taiji Emperor's sword, but I'll be using the Yin energy. I will not be using any consumables, and I will not be using the speed bonus here. I'm just going to be using a vanilla kit. I'll be giving myself some critical chance, just to show you his damage spread at the end. And some key things to note, I'll be using some skills in a particular order. Firstly, Overdrive. As you can see, Overdrive has a 20-second cooldown, so I'll want to use this within maybe like the first 5-6 seconds of the rotation. I'll have skills like Rhasa, Saya. I can use both of these twice, so I'll be using these at the start of the rotation. And Ghost Slash has a 6-second cooldown. Phantom Sword Slash has an 8-second cooldown. I can get at least 3, maybe not 4 of these skills. And Ghost Slash I'll be using every chance I get in between skills. Abyss has a 30-second cooldown, cannot use that twice. Dark Flame Sword, Possession, Blade Phantom, all too long to use multiple times in the 30-second rotation. So that's it. But in the downtime, I will also constantly be using my basic attacks. So please look for that as well. Again, Overdrive. Second Awakening, another Ghost Slash, another one of those. And Third Awakening here. And that's it. That's what a rotation will generally look like. And you'll see that Overdrive is still very, very high damage with no talismans yet. Phantom Sword Slash is actually very, very high DPS. And you'll also see Kalla does a pretty decent chunk of damage here. But you also have to factor in Keiga's damage, which is your basic attack damage. The 26,000 here, Kalla did 81,000. Together they did about the same damage as my level 95 skill in a 30-second rotation. That's pretty significant. That's like, what, 8% of my damage. That's very, very high. Ghost Slash, you can see I got 4 uses. I could have gotten 5 if I started with it, but I didn't. And let's see here. Abyss, I did not max, so it's just going to be doing a little bit of damage. My Tombstone Swamp is actually level 1. I only use this for utility, for gathering enemies together. That's about it. Now, with Talismans and my specific gear setup, this will look quite different and way busier. And so some key things to note, I have Celestial Dancer 5-piece. You can even hear the music playing now. I'll be giving myself 60% attack speed. I'll be using consumables this time around. Just Undiluted, Mind Stem, and Warlord's Cry. Some key things. I'll be starting my rotation with Dark Flame Sword, except with the Mind Stem. You'll see that this has a 26-second, 25-second cooldown, and Blade Phantom has a 27-second cooldown. So I'll be using these right at the start, so that I can get these in at the end of the rotation as well. Another thing, you'll also see me use Tombstone Swap, even though it's level 1. Again, this skill has a 27-second cooldown as well, so I can get free damage at the end. Abyss, even though I don't have it maxed, has a 20-second cooldown. I can use this twice. And then Overdrive, I'll be able to use 3 times in this rotation. And of course, I'll be using Ghost Slash, Phantom Sword Slash, Saya, Rhasa, every chance I get. That's about it. But just like before, I'll be using my basic attack string the entire time in between skills. There we go. I've got Abyss, don't mind me. So I'll be getting 2 of those in this rotation, but that's totally fine. I messed that up, but that's fine. So notice I was using Taiji's Yang energy. My speed is quite slow, but it does give me more damage. I'm also using Rotos to offset some of that speed penalty while actually fighting enemies. That's very, very handy to have. But here you'll notice that Blade Phantom is at the top of my chart, just because I barely got in a second use. Overdrive, I got 3 uses, is also at the top of my chart. Dark Flame Sword, again, the damage is on the lower side DPS-wise, but because I got the last one in at the end of the rotation, still pretty good damage. Plague Rhasa, 3 uses, very strong. Zeeg, Second Awakening is actually very weak for Soulbender. And then Phantom Sword Slash, 5 uses, not bad. Crevice, not bad. Saya, it's okay. Ghost Slash, I got 6 of these in, pretty good damage. Again, I could have gotten another 6 point something here for the second Abyss, but I didn't. Crimson Swamp, not great. And Possession, it's okay. And that's it. There's nothing really complicated about this class, but it can take a little bit of time to practice these free cast skills. So if you have these long animation skills like these with wind up, it's pretty easy. But when you start using very quick animation skills like Phantom Sword Slash, you might actually just miss a free cast and end up doing one of these, where you perform the skill and then just raw cast the ghost. Generally speaking, this isn't that bad, right? It might be a little embarrassing, but worst case scenario, you might actually get cancelled out of your skill, and that's no good, because these free casts you cannot get cancelled out of unless you just, get cancelled on frame 1. But generally speaking, even if you get cancelled out of that ability, the free cast will still happen. So raw casting is not recommended naturally. So avoid that whenever possible. And that's that. I'm going to go into gear guidelines next. Soulbender is actually, again, kind of a weird class where his damage rotation includes a lot of basic attack strings, and it's actually a pretty significant amount of damage. And he has these free cast abilities that, have pretty low cooldowns relatively. So he doesn't really need any or a lot of cooldown reduction. So Dancer 5-piece is giving me about 23% across the board. And that's all I need. I don't need Assassin, or I don't need Dawn, etc. Also, I'm, again, using Rotos and Taiji together because when I use Yang energy, you'll see my attack speed and movement speed plummet, and I am way slower. Dancer is giving me a decent amount of attack speed though, so that's kind of nice. But with Rhodos, you'll see that as I attack, my attack speed keeps on racking up. And this is quite nice. However, later on, eventually you'll gain access to Ozma epics, specifically Barius, and the necklace will actually give you attack speed and casting speed, as well as the magic stone giving you movement speed. This will basically completely replace Rhodos, and now you can move on to something like Nex or Assassin, or eventually even Gatekeeper in the next level cap. But until then, Rhodos is actually a fantastic choice. It is slightly weaker than Nex, and it can be weaker than Assassin, but the extra speed is fantastic to have when paired with Taiji. Now, on the topic of weapons, Taiji is not your only choice. You can use an Avant-Garde technically. The weapon is totally fine. It's, I would say, pretty comparable. However, if you're going to use an Avant-Garde instead, I would probably recommend using a Caliburn. A Caliburn is a short sword with a attack speed boost and casting speed as well, and this is actually very, very powerful now. I would say this is probably stronger than Avant-Garde in most scenarios, and is comparable to Taiji even. Angered Vadil, on the other hand, is generally weaker in every scenario to Caliburn, just because they, for some reason, have similar damage modifiers. Like this has 50% bonus damage, and this has 23% bonus damage, but also strength and attack damage, so it has a wider spread of modifiers. That's kind of a strange decision, but generally speaking, because of that, Caliburn is almost always going to be on top. And you should basically never look at the other weapon choices. Bludgeons have relatively low magic attack, and Zambatos have the lowest magic attack. So I don't recommend you look at those at all. He is a percentage-based class, so having a Katana or short sword is recommended. And again, you can use Assassin if you want cooldown reduction. You can use Nex if you want a budget set with just raw damage. You might not need the utility from Rhodos. Roxy, on the other hand, I would absolutely not recommend, because his awakenings are pretty weak, especially his second awakening. And lastly, Gatekeeper is not recommended currently because his Lunar Curtain passive gives him 30 shadow damage, which means if you're using Gatekeeper, as you're cycling through the elements, you will do maximum damage on Shadow element, but for the other three elements you'll be doing fairly less. It's not the worst thing if you have Gatekeeper. It is viable. You can use it if you have it, but eventually you'll probably want to switch out of it. And that's about it. Nothing too complicated about this class. To recap, the Soulbender is a fantastic synergy class with great survivability and consistent damage output. His fast-paced yet flexible melee playstyle can make him quite enjoyable to play, so if you're into that sort of thing, please give him a shot and just see if he clicks with you. If you have any questions regarding this class, please drop a comment below. You can also join my Discord server, which I'll leave a link to below as well. You can also catch me live on Twitch if you'd like to ask me anything directly. I stream almost every day, generally after 5 PM Pacific, sometimes 6, so I hope to see you there. Otherwise, have a good one, and cheers guys.